27 sitcoms from the 70s and 80s that lasted way too long. Some shows end at the perfect time and become legends. Others, they keep going long after the magic fades, long after the jokes stop landing, and long after audiences quietly move on. Back in the 70s and 80s, sitcoms ruled television. They made people laugh, created iconic characters, and filled living rooms every night. But behind the laughter, something strange was happening. Networks refused to let go. Stories started repeating. Characters changed beyond recognition, and some shows stayed on air years after they should have said goodbye. One hit sitcom lost its main star and still kept going. Another character was replaced so many times that fans barely recognized the cast. And one show stretched so far past its peak, it became a completely different series. Yet somehow, they didn't stop. They kept getting renewed, they kept airing, and they kept testing how long a sitcom could survive. These are 27 sitcoms from the 70s and 80s that lasted way too long. 27. The show became famous after it ended. It's kind of ironic, but one of the most fascinating things about the Addams Family is that its true success didn't really happen while it was on air. When the show originally aired in the mid-1960s, it struggled to maintain strong ratings. Viewers enjoyed it, sure, but it wasn't seen as a massive hit compared to other shows of its time. After just 2 seasons, the network decided to cancel it. And just like that, it seemed like the strange and spooky family had reached the end of their journey. But that wasn't the end at all. In fact, it was only the beginning. Once the show entered syndication, everything changed. Reruns started airing on different channels, reaching new audiences who had never seen it before. Younger viewers, especially, were drawn to its unusual humor, gothic charm, and completely different take on what a normal family looked like. Over time, the show built a loyal fan base that kept growing year after year. What once seemed like a short-lived series slowly turned into a cult classic. Its characters became iconic, its style unforgettable, and its influence spread into movies, cartoons, and modern adaptations. The Addams Family didn't just survive cancellation, it thrived long after it was gone, proving that sometimes success just takes a little more time to arrive. Before we move on, take a second to subscribe to the channel and stick around for more surprising facts just like this. 26. The mansion interior was built on set. When you watch The Addams Family, the mansion feels incredibly real, almost like a place you could walk into if you ever found the right street. Every room has its own strange personality, filled with odd decorations, antique furniture, and mysterious corners. But here's the truth. None of that interior actually existed as a real house. It was all carefully built inside a studio, piece by piece, to create that unforgettable atmosphere. The production team designed the interior set with extreme attention to detail. They didn't just want a spooky house. They wanted a home that felt lived in by a very unusual family. That's why you see things like strange artwork, unusual sculptures, and furniture that looks both elegant and eerie at the same time. Every object had a purpose, even if it seemed bizarre on the surface. Because it was a constructed set, the crew had full control over how everything looked on camera. Walls could be moved, lighting could be adjusted, and rooms could be expanded to fit the needs of each scene. This flexibility allowed the show to maintain its unique visual style without limitations. In the end, the mansion's interior became just as iconic as the characters themselves. It wasn't just a background, It was a key part of the storytelling, helping bring the strange world of the Addams Family to life in a way that felt both magical and unforgettable. 25. Ted Cassidy also performed Thing. Most people remember Ted Cassidy as Lurch, the tall and quiet butler with a deep voice and unforgettable presence. But what many don't realize is that he also played another important role on the show. Thing, the mysterious disembodied hand that became one of the most unique characters in television history. Bringing Thing to life wasn't as simple as it looked. It required careful planning, clever camera work, and a lot of physical effort behind the scenes. In many episodes, Ted Cassidy would position himself under the set or inside specially designed boxes, stretching his long arm through small openings to perform as Thing. It wasn't comfortable, but it was effective. His large hands and controlled movements gave Thing a personality of its own. Without speaking a single word, Thing could express emotion, humor, and even sarcasm just through gestures. That's what made the character so memorable and fun to watch. The fact that one actor could bring two completely different characters to life, one fully visible and one barely seen, shows just how talented and versatile Cassidy was. His contribution to the show went far beyond what appeared on screen, making him an essential part of what made the Addams Family so special and creatively unique. 24. Lisa Loring was very young. Playing a character as iconic as Wednesday Addams is no small task, but what makes it even more surprising is just how young Lisa Loring was when she took on the role. She was only 6 years old at the time, yet she managed to deliver a performance that felt natural, confident, and perfectly in tune with the show's dark humor. Despite her young age, Lisa spent long hours on set, learning lines, rehearsing scenes, and working alongside experienced adult actors. It wasn't always easy, especially for a child, but she handled it with impressive professionalism. Her calm expression and slightly eerie charm became a defining part of Wednesday's character. The role quickly made her recognizable, and she became one of the standout stars of the show. However, early fame can come with its own challenges. Growing up in the spotlight meant dealing with pressures that most children never experience, and it had a lasting impact on her life beyond the series. Still, her portrayal of Wednesday left a permanent mark on television history. Even today, when people think of the character, Lisa Loring's version is often the one that comes to mind first. Her performance proved that age doesn't limit talent, and sometimes even the youngest actors can create something truly unforgettable. 23. The show ran only 2 seasons. At first glance, it's hard to believe that the Addams Family only lasted for 2 seasons. With such a strong cultural presence and lasting popularity, you'd expect it to have run for many years. But in reality, the show aired a total of 64 episodes before coming to an end. During its original run, the series faced tough competition from other popular shows, including ones with a similar theme. Ratings played a big role in determining its fate, and unfortunately, they weren't strong enough to keep it going beyond its 2nd season. The network eventually decided to cancel it, bringing the story to an early close. Even so, those 2 seasons were packed with memorable moments, unique storylines, and characters that stood out from anything else on television at the time. The show didn't try to follow the usual formula. Instead, it embraced its weirdness and turned it into something entertaining and different. What makes this even more interesting is that its short run didn't stop it from becoming a long-term success. In fact, the limited number of episodes made it easier for new audiences to discover and enjoy later on. Sometimes it's not about how long a show lasts, but how strong its impact is. And in that sense, The Addams Family did more than enough to leave its mark. 22. Gomez destroyed. Expensive model trains. One of the most entertaining running gags in The Addams Family involves Gomez and his love for model trains, but not in the way you'd expect. Instead of carefully building and preserving them like most collectors, Gomez had a habit of destroying his own trains dramatically. He would set up detailed tracks and miniature scenes only to crash the trains moments later with pure excitement. At first, it seems like a simple joke, but behind the scenes, this gag was actually quite costly. The model trains used on set weren't cheap toys. They were detailed, well-crafted pieces that often had to be repaired or replaced after each destruction scene. For a television production working within a budget, this became an ongoing expense. Still, the creators kept the gag because it perfectly matched Gomez's personality. His over-the-top enthusiasm, unpredictable behavior, and love for chaos made these moments feel natural and hilarious. It also added a layer of humor that viewers didn't usually see in typical family shows of that era. Strangely, these destroyed trains became a symbol of what made the show unique. It wasn't afraid to break the rules, literally and creatively. And even though it may have cost the production team a bit more money, it gave audiences something unforgettable to laugh about every time Gomez decided to send another train flying off the tracks. 21. Morticia rarely blinked. Morticia Addams had a presence that was calm, elegant, and just a little bit unsettling, and a big part of that came from a very subtle detail. She rarely blinked. While most viewers might not notice it right away, this small choice added a mysterious and almost otherworldly quality to her character. Carolyn Jones, the actress behind Morticia, intentionally trained herself to blink as little as possible during scenes. It wasn't easy, especially under bright studio lights, but she believed it would make the character feel more composed and unusual, and she was right. The result was a steady, almost hypnotic gaze that made Morticia stand out in every scene she appeared in. This simple technique helped create a sense of control and quiet power. While other characters moved, reacted, and showed emotion more openly, Morticia remained calm and graceful, rarely breaking her expression. It gave her a timeless quality, as if she existed slightly outside the normal world. Sometimes it's the smallest details that make the biggest difference. In this case, something as simple as not blinking became a defining trait. It added depth to Morticia's personality and helped turn her into one of the most iconic characters in the entire series. 20. Thing required. Custom-built sets. Things may have been just a hand, but bringing that character to life was far more complicated than it looked on screen. Every scene involving Thing required specially designed sets that allowed the illusion to work perfectly. Without these custom setups, the character simply wouldn't have been possible. To create the effect, the production team built hidden compartments, boxes, and tunnels into furniture and floors. These spaces allowed actors to position themselves underneath or behind the set, extending a hand through small openings. It had to be done carefully so that the rest of the body stayed completely hidden from the camera. Lighting and camera angles also played a huge role. If anything was slightly off, the illusion would break. That meant every scene with Thing required extra planning and precision compared to normal scenes. And it wasn't just acting, it was a mix of performance, engineering, and clever filmmaking. Despite all the effort, the result was worth it. Thing became one of the most beloved and recognizable characters in the show. It proved that creativity and smart design could turn even the simplest idea into something truly memorable, adding another layer of uniqueness to the Addams Family. 19. The show used black and white on purpose. By the time the Addams Family aired, color television was already becoming more common. Many shows were starting to embrace bright visuals and colorful sets to attract audiences. But instead of following that trend, this show made a very deliberate choice. It stayed in black and white. This wasn't because of limitations or lack of resources. It was a creative decision. The producers believed that black and white would better match the gothic tone of the series. The absence of color added a certain mood, making everything feel more mysterious, dramatic, and slightly eerie. It also allowed the set designers to experiment in unique ways. They used unusual color combinations like bright pinks and greens, knowing that the camera would translate them into different shades of gray. This gave them more control over how scenes looked on screen, helping create the perfect atmosphere. In the end, this decision played a huge role in shaping the identity of the show. While others chased realism with color, the Addams Family leaned into style and mood. The black and white visuals became part of its charm, proving that sometimes choosing a different path can make something stand out even more. 18. Gomez almost had a different name. It's hard to imagine the Addams Family without Gomez Addams, but believe it or not, his name was almost something completely different. When cartoonist Charles Addams first created the characters, he didn't originally give them fixed names. As the television show moved into development, the creators had to decide what each character would be called, and one of the early name ideas for Gomez was Rapelli. Now, that name had a certain strange charm to it, fitting the odd nature of the family. But when John Astin stepped into the role, he felt that Gomez suited the character much better. It had a warmer, more energetic sound, something that matched the passionate, lively personality he was bringing to the screen. The producers agreed with him, and just like that, the name was changed. Oh, it turned out to be the perfect decision. Gomez became iconic, instantly recognizable, and closely tied to the character's identity. It's one of those small changes that ended up making a huge difference. Sometimes the right name can shape how a character is remembered forever. In this case, a simple choice helped define one of television's most beloved personalities, making Gomez Addams unforgettable in every possible way. 17. Jodie Foster voiced Pugsley. Here's a surprising connection that many fans don't know about. The Addams Family once appeared in a crossover episode with Scooby-Doo, and during that special, the voice of Pugsley was provided by a very young Jodie Foster. At the time, she was only 11 years old and just beginning her journey in the entertainment world. Back then, no one could have guessed how big her career would become. She was simply a talented young performer taking on voice roles and small acting for us. But even in that early stage, her ability to deliver lines with clarity and confidence was clear. The crossover itself was a fun moment, blending two very different worlds into one episode. Hearing a future award-winning actress behind the voice of such a quirky character adds an extra layer of interest when looking back today. As years passed, Jodie Foster went on to become one of the most respected figures in the film industry, earning major awards and recognition for her work. Knowing that she once voiced Pugsley makes that crossover feel even more special, It's always fascinating to see where big stars started. And this little piece of history shows how even the smallest roles can be part of a much bigger journey. 16. The Addams Family and the Munsters Rivalry. When The Addams Family first aired, it wasn't the only show bringing spooky humor to television. Around the same time, another series called The Munsters also appeared, and naturally, comparisons began almost immediately. Both shows featured unusual families, strange houses, and a mix of horror themes with comedy. Because of these similarities, a quiet rivalry formed between the two. Networks and producers were very aware that they were competing for the same audience. Viewers often chose one favorite over the other, which added even more pressure on both shows to stand out. Despite the competition, each show had its own unique style. And the Munsters leaned more toward classic monster characters, while the Addams Family focused on a darker, more elegant kind of weirdness. This difference helped both series build their own identity instead of becoming copies of each other. Interestingly, actors from one show rarely appeared in the other. Producers wanted to keep the worlds separate and maintain that sense of rivalry. In the end, both shows became memorable in their own way, but this competition added an extra layer of excitement during their original run. 15. Carolyn Jones hid her pregnancy. During the filming of The Addams Family, Carolyn Jones faced a personal situation that most viewers never noticed. She was pregnant. Instead of pausing production or drawing attention to it, the show quietly worked around it, using clever techniques. Costume designers played a big role in this. Morticia's long, flowing dresses were adjusted to hide any visible changes, keeping her appearance consistent with the character's slim and elegant look. At the same time, camera angles were carefully chosen to avoid focusing on areas that might reveal her pregnancy. The production team handled everything smoothly, making sure the illusion stayed intact without interrupting the story. It required planning, coordination, and attention to detail, but the result was seamless. Most viewers had no idea anything was different. Morticia remained the same calm, graceful, and mysterious figure throughout the episodes. This behind-the-scenes effort shows just how much work goes into maintaining continuity in a television series. In the end, it's a great example of how creativity and teamwork can solve challenges without the audience ever noticing, keeping the magic of the show alive from start to finish. 14. Ted Cassidy was insecure about his height. Standing at an incredible 6 feet 9 inches tall, Ted Cassidy had a physical presence that was impossible to ignore. But surprisingly, that same height, which later became his greatest strength on screen, was once something he felt uncomfortable about. Growing up, being so much taller than everyone else made him stand out in ways that weren't always easy to handle. Like many people who feel different, he struggled with confidence during his early years. His height drew attention everywhere he went, and not all of it was positive. It made everyday situations feel awkward, and for a long time, he didn't see it as something valuable. However, everything changed when he stepped into the world of acting. Suddenly, that unique feature became an advantage. His towering height made him perfect for roles that required a strong, unforgettable presence. When he was cast as Lurch in The Addams Family, it all came together. His deep voice, slow movements, and imposing figure created a character that audiences could never forget. What once felt like a weakness turned into a defining trait. Ted Cassidy's journey shows how something that makes you feel different can eventually become the very thing that sets you apart in the best possible way. 13. The name Pubert was rejected by the network. When Charles Addams first imagined the strange and unusual family, he had some very odd and creative ideas, including character names. One of those ideas was the name Pubert, which he suggested for one of the children. It definitely matched the quirky tone of the family, but not everyone agreed. When the television network reviewed the name, they weren't comfortable with it. They felt it sounded too suggestive or strange for a mainstream audience at the time. As a result, they rejected it and pushed for something more acceptable. That's how the name Pugsley came into place. It was still unique and slightly unusual, but much safer for television. The change helped the show avoid unnecessary controversy while still keeping its odd charm intact. Interestingly, the original name didn't disappear forever. Years later, Puberty was finally used in one of the Addams Family films, almost like a nod to the original idea that never made it onto the show. This little detail highlights how even small decisions behind the scenes can shape what audiences see, proving that sometimes creative ideas have to be adjusted to fit the time and place. 12. Many props were stolen after the show ended. The world of the Addams Family was filled with strange and fascinating objects. From unusual decorations to creepy antiques, the set was packed with items that helped bring the family's dark and quirky lifestyle to life. But after the show ended, something unexpected happened. Many of these props simply disappeared. Following the end of production, the props were placed into storage. At some point, someone broke into that storage area and stole a large number of items. These weren't ordinary objects. They were unique pieces specifically designed for the show. I'm making them both valuable and impossible to replace. The theft was a huge loss for the production team. Not only did it mean losing carefully crafted items, but it also erased pieces of television history. Since many of these props were one of a kind, they were never recovered or recreated in the same way. Over time, this incident added a layer of mystery to the show's legacy. Fans often wonder where those items ended up and whether any still exist today. It's one of those real-life moments that feels just as strange and intriguing as the fictional world the show created. 11. John Astin. Originally auditioned for Lurch. Before becoming the energetic and passionate Gomez Addams, John Astin actually had a very different role in mind. When he first auditioned for the Addams Family, he tried out for the part of Lurch, the tall and quiet butler. It might seem surprising now, considering how perfectly he fit the role of Gomez. During the audition process, the producers quickly noticed something important. While Astin was clearly talented, his natural energy and expressive personality didn't quite match the slow, silent nature of Lurch. Instead of forcing the fit, they made a smart decision. They considered him for a completely different role. That role, of course, was Gomez. And as soon as he stepped into it, everything clicked. His enthusiasm, charm, and dramatic style brought the character to life in a way that no one else could have done. This unexpected change turned out to be one of the best casting decisions the show ever made. It's a perfect example of how sometimes not getting the role you aim for can lead to something even better. She's shaping a character that becomes truly iconic. 10. The real mansion was later demolished. The eerie mansion seen in the Addams Family felt like a perfect home for such a strange and unusual family. But what many people don't realize is that it was inspired by a real house. For the early exterior shots, the production used a Victorian-style mansion located in Los Angeles. The building had a naturally Gothic look, making it an ideal choice for the show's opening and pilot episode. This house wasn't just a random location, it had history behind it. having been built in the late 1800s. Its detailed architecture, tall structure, and slightly haunting appearance gave the show a sense of realism that a completely artificial set might not have achieved. However, the connection didn't last very long. After being used for those early scenes, the house was no longer part of the production. A few years later, in 1967, the building was demolished. The land was eventually repurposed, becoming part of a college property. Even though the physical structure no longer exists, its image lives on through the show. Every time viewers see that iconic exterior, they're actually looking at a piece of real history that once stood in the heart of Los Angeles, adding authenticity to the strange world of the Addams Family. 9. Cousin It was created for the TV show. Some of the most memorable characters in the Addams Family didn't come from the original cartoons at all. One perfect example is Cousin It, the small, fast-talking character completely covered in hair. Interestingly, he was created specifically for the television series and did not exist in the original work by Charles Addams. The idea came from the show's producers, who wanted to add something even more unusual to the already strange family. And they definitely succeeded. Cousin It stood out immediately, not just because of his appearance, but also because of the way he spoke in a high-pitched, almost impossible-to-understand voice. Actor Felix Silla brought the character to life, performing inside the full-body costume. It wasn't an easy role considering the limited visibility and movement, but the result was worth it. Cousin It quickly became a fan favorite. His popularity proved that new ideas could blend perfectly with existing ones. Even though he wasn't part of the original concept, he felt like he had always belonged, adding another layer of charm and weirdness to the Addams Family. 8. The composer sang all the theme song vocals. The theme song of the Addams Family is one of the most recognizable tunes in television history. Those catchy notes and iconic finger snaps are instantly familiar. But behind that simple and memorable sound is a surprising detail. Vic Mizzy, the man who created the song, also performed the vocals himself. Instead of bringing in multiple singers, Mizzy used a technique called multi-tracking. This allowed him to record his own voice several times and layer it together, creating the effect of a group singing. It was a clever and cost-effective solution that worked perfectly for the show. For the deeper voice parts, Ted Cassidy added his contribution, giving the theme a richer and more playful tone. The combination of these elements created a sound that was both simple and unforgettable. What makes this even more impressive is how quickly it all came together. Despite being created in a short time, the theme song became a lasting symbol of the show. It's a great example of how creativity and smart use of resources can produce something truly timeless. 7. The set was actually bright pink. When watching The Addams Family, everything looks dark, moody, and perfectly gothic. The mansion appears filled with shadows, giving it that classic spooky atmosphere. But behind the scenes, the reality was completely different. The set was actually painted in bright and unusual colors, including shades of pink, teal, and gold. This might sound strange at first, but it was done for a very specific reason. Since the show was filmed in black and white, the colors didn't appear on screen the way they looked in real life. Instead, they were transformed into different shades of gray, depending on how the cameras captured them. Set designers carefully chose these bright colors to control how each surface appeared on television. A pink wall, for example, might show up as a soft gray, while a darker color could appear almost black. This allowed them to create the perfect contrast and depth needed for the show's unique visual style. It's a fascinating reminder that what we see on screen isn't always what exists in reality. The bright, colorful set played a hidden role in creating the dark and mysterious world that audiences loved, proving that sometimes the magic happens behind the scenes. 6. The show was almost canceled early. At first, The Addams Family didn't look like a strong success story. When it began airing, the ratings were not as high as the network had hoped. Viewers were still getting used to its strange humor and unusual characters, which were very different from the typical family shows of that time. Because of this, the network started to worry quite early. There were serious discussions about canceling the show during its first season. Executives weren't sure if it could compete with other programs or hold audience attention long enough to justify its place on the schedule. For a moment, it seemed like the Addams Family might disappear almost as quickly as they had arrived. But the producers didn't give up easily. They believed in the uniqueness of the show and pushed to keep it alive. They continued working on improving the episodes, on hoping that more viewers would connect with their dark humor and distinctive style. Their efforts paid off, at least for a while. The show managed to survive beyond that early danger and completed 2 full seasons. Even though it didn't last much longer, this close call makes its later success even more impressive. It proves that sometimes even the most iconic shows come very close to ending before they truly get their chance. 5. Jackie Coogan transformed himself to get the role. Getting the role of Uncle Fester wasn't easy, even for an experienced actor like Jackie Coogan. When he first auditioned, the producers didn't think he was the right fit for the character. At that point, it looked like he might miss out on being part of the show entirely. But Coogan didn't give up. Instead, he decided to completely transform his appearance to match the strange and unusual nature of Uncle Fester. He shaved his head completely bald, changing his look in a dramatic way that immediately grabbed attention. When he returned to show the producers his new appearance, everything changed. The transformation was exactly what they had been looking for. It captured the odd charm and unique presence needed for the character. This time, they saw him differently, and he got the role. That decision turned out to be perfect. His portrayal of Uncle Fester became one of the most memorable parts of the show. It's a great example of how determination and a willingness to take risks can open doors, proving that sometimes going all in is what makes the difference. 4. The mansion once sat on a street named Addams. The iconic mansion seen in The Addams Family wasn't just a random creation. It had a real-world connection that made it even more interesting. For the pilot episode and opening shots, the production used a real Victorian house located in Los Angeles. This house stood at 21 Chester Place in an area known as the West Addams District. What makes this detail even more fascinating is the name Connection. The street itself had once been associated with the name Addams, which feels almost too perfect for the show. It added an extra layer of coincidence that fans still find intriguing today. The house had the exact look the producers wanted: tall, detailed, and slightly eerie. It gave the show an authentic visual starting point before everything else was built in the studio. However, its role was limited to those early appearances, and it didn't remain part of the production for long. Even though it was only used briefly, that real mansion helped shape the identity of the show. It grounded the fictional world in reality, making the strange feel just a little more believable and adding depth to the overall experience. 3. The theme song was written in one weekend. The theme song of The Addams Family is instantly recognizable, but what makes it even more impressive is how quickly it was created. Vic Mizzy, the man behind the music, came up with the entire tune in just one weekend. Instead of overcomplicating things, he kept the melody simple and catchy. That decision made it easy to remember and fun to listen to. The famous finger snaps, which became a signature part of the song, were actually his way of keeping rhythm while developing the idea. Despite being created in such a short time, the theme perfectly matched the tone of the show. It had a playful, yet slightly spooky feel, capturing the spirit of the Addams Family in just a few seconds of music. Sometimes the best ideas come quickly, and this is a perfect example of that. What started as a simple weekend project turned into one of the most iconic television themes ever made, proving that creativity doesn't always need a long process to leave a lasting impact. 2. Lurch's catchphrase. Was an accident. Sometimes the most iconic moments in television history aren't planned at all, and Lurch's famous line is a perfect example of that. When the Addams Family was first being developed, the character of Lurch was originally meant to be completely silent. He was supposed to communicate only through expressions and body language, adding to his mysterious and slightly intimidating presence. But during the filming of the pilot episode, something unexpected happened. Ted Cassidy, who played Lurch, decided to improvise a line. In response to being called, he simply said, "You rang?" in his deep, unforgettable voice. It wasn't in the script, and no one had planned for it. The moment instantly stood out. The cast and crew loved it, and it added a new layer of personality to the character. Instead of staying silent, Lurch suddenly became more engaging and memorable. Because of that one improvised line, the writers changed their approach. They gave Lurch more dialogue, building around that now famous catchphrase. What started as a small, spontaneous decision turned into one of the most recognizable lines in television history, showing how a single moment can completely shape a character. 1. The show used real studio audiences. One of the key elements that gave the Addams Family its lively and natural feel was something many viewers might not even think about. It was filmed in front of a real studio audience. Instead of relying entirely on pre-recorded laugh tracks, the show captured genuine reactions from people watching the scenes unfold in real time. This made a big difference in how the episodes felt. The laughter you hear wasn't just added later, it came from actual viewers responding to the humor as it happened. That gave the show a more authentic and energetic atmosphere, making each moment feel more alive. For the actors, this setup also changed the way they performed. They had to adjust their timing based on audience reactions. If a joke got a big laugh, they would pause slightly before continuing, allowing the moment to land properly. It required skill and awareness, almost like performing in a live theater. In the end, this approach helped the show stand out. The connection between the performers and the audience created a rhythm that felt natural and engaging, adding to the charm that made the Addams Family so enjoyable to watch. And just like that, the creepiest family on television leaves behind even more mysteries than we ever expected. From improvised lines that became legendary, to stolen props that vanished without a trace, to casting decisions that almost changed everything. The Addams Family wasn't just strange on screen. It was even stranger behind the scenes. And the craziest part? All of this came from a show that only lasted 2 seasons, yet still lives on decades later. So here's something to think about. Which of these facts shocked you the most? And which one do you think they tried hardest to keep hidden? If you enjoyed uncovering these weird secrets, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive into your favorite shows. Because trust me, there are always more secrets hiding in the shadows.